Dear children, we are now going to read the story given in chapter 17. The name of the story is A Heroine of the Sea. The book A Heroine of the Sea was written by Bessie Marchant. Bessie Marchant was a prolific British author who wrote numerous works of fiction, including historical novels, romances, and children's stories. The story is about Grace Darling, a brave young woman who risked her life to save shipwrecked passengers. Around the rocky coast of England stand many lonely lighthouses, their lights shining across the sea warn sailors at night of dangerous rocks. When they see the lights, sailors take their ships far out to sea, but sometimes fierce storms push the sailing ships to dwindle and float towards the rocks. Grace Darling was the daughter of William Darling, a lighthouse keeper. She had lived all her life in lonely lighthouses far away from towns and cities. Her father was a wise and educated man who brought up all his 9 children very thoughtfully. They were taught to read and write and to be honest, brave, and unselfish. Grace was the seventh child. When Grace was 10 years old, the family went to live in Longstone Lighthouse. Their new home was near the east coast of England on a remote island, so William had to row back to Brownsman to gather vegetables and for other things. The family spent most of the time on the ground floor of the lighthouse, which consisted of a large room heated by a wooden stove. The room was the living room, dining room, and kitchen in one, and had a spiral staircase leading to 3 bedrooms above and the light at the top of the tower. When the children were older, they left their home one by one and found work in the cities. At last, all of them had left the lighthouse except Grace, who stayed at home to help her parents. Grace was a little woman, not tall and big built like her father, but had a large heart and courage. On the night of 6th September 1838, a dreadful storm was blowing. Grace was used to storms, but she was always unhappy about the poor sailors who were at sea in the storm, battling for their survival. That night, a sheep call for Forfarshire was wrecked upon the rocks a mile away from the lighthouse. Grace and her parents did not hear the sound of the crash. The noise of the wind was too loud. Most of the passengers were drowned, but 9 men and women were able to climb onto a rock. In the distance, they saw the warm light of the lighthouse, but their shouts and screams were not heard. All night they clung there onto the rocks in the raging storm. Next morning, at 6 o'clock, Grace was dressing. She casually looked out of her window and saw the storm was still blowing. Suddenly she stopped. Wasn't there something on the distant rocks? She thought. Calling her father, she looked again. Yes, there were certainly people clinging on to the rocks, but they were half under the sea. The heavy winds, rain, and waves had battered the stricken vessel, a part of which could be faintly seen. We must rescue them before they are drowned, cried Grace. We must do something, she urged. William Darling was a brave old man, but he shook his head. It is hopeless, he said. We can do nothing. How can I row a boat by myself through these waves? If only I had another man here to help me. Will you ever sleep again if they die? And I can help you, father, cried Grace. I can row a boat as well as any man, can't I? I am small, but I am strong. You and I have often rowed together. We can reach those unfortunate people. Mrs. Darling was listening to her husband and daughter. No, no, she exclaimed. How will it help those poor people if you are drowned? You cannot row in this storm. Do not try. A girl like you cannot do a man's job. Let us pray for them, William. God will help them perhaps, but we cannot. Grace was determined. She argued until at last her father had to agree. Poor Mrs. Darling, with a heavy heart, helped them to get the boat out. She watched and prayed as they set off. As they launched their small boat, they were forced to keep to the sheltered side of the island, which meant they had even farther to row, a distance of about half a mile extra. The boat went up and down over waves which were as high as hills. It went up to the top of a wave and then down into a great valley between the waves. But little by little they came near the rocks and heard their cries for help. As the Forfarshire had run aground, the waves beat mercilessly against her, breaking her in two. The stern sank, drowning nearly all of the passengers at the back of the ship. The forward end of the ship had stuck fast to the rock, and 12 of those who were at the bow of the ship, 7 passengers and 5 of the crew, remained clinging perilously to the wreck. As the tide went down, the survivors managed to get off the wreck onto the rocky island. 3 of the passengers died of exposure and 9 of them clung on to the rock. Grace remained on the boat while her father helped 5 people onto the boat rowing to the lighthouse. Then Grace and the 3 women got out to the lighthouse. Old William Darling and the 2 sailors rowed back across the dangerous sea to rescue other 4 victims who were still on the rock. The weather deteriorated to the extent that everyone was obliged to remain at the lighthouse for a few days before returning to shore. Grace did not have any time to rest now. All those days she was busy helping her mother to warm and feed the rescued passengers. After several days, these passengers were able to return to their homes in England. They told the story of the brave girl and her father to their families and friends. Grace Darling and her father became famous. The story of their heroism was told in the newspapers. They were given a special reward for their heroism. Money was raised to help all the lighthouse keepers in their dangerous, lonely lives. Poor Grace did not live long after the rescue. In 1842, she fell ill with tuberculosis while visiting the mainland. She died at the age of 27, but she is still remembered for her unselfish courage. In England, at Bamberg, a museum is dedicated in her name to display her achievements.